Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Good evening. Hello. Hello. Hi. This is the Erudition Network interactive Black History and Knowledge session. I am your host, Eddie Phillips, and we are here on another Thursday to talk about something. Today, it's so busy today that I really didn't have time to put into works the subject that I wanted to talk about. I wanted to get into DNA today, but it would be unfair to you as an audience out there to do a lesson on DNA or the fundamentals of life without enough, without enough visuals. And I didn't have time today to go and sit down and start pulling those visuals in. So what we'll do is we'll push that back a week or so. And what we will try to do is get back to it coming up. Additionally, we have been having some problems with StreamYard. If StreamYard continues to do this, I'm going to find another way for us to broadcast. But we've been having problems because StreamYard does not let me see all of the comments. If you are on looking at Erudition through, say, Tina's page or through my personal page, we will not see your chats, what you put into the chat. However, if you go to the Erudition Network page on Facebook, which you should probably already be a member of or know, and click on the link through that page, we will see, I tested it, we will see your comments. So I would ask you to go to the Erudition Network page on Facebook, or go to our stream on YouTube, and we will see your comments without a problem. Whatever StreamYard is doing, it has blocked these pages and made it nigh impossible for us to see you. So if you're going to my page, to Eddie K. Phillips, I'm not going to see your comments. Just click and go to, or look up in Facebook, type the Erudition Network, and you should see us. I'm also going to drop that link here in the chat and on some of those pages so that you can get there and be able to join us and we can see. Because I really want to see your comments, and I really want, there's no point in an interactive if we can't see you. So I'm going to go to those pages, and I'm going to drop Tina's page and my page, and in the comments, I'm going to drop the link to the Erudition Network page, and you can go in there and click on the live, and we will be comment on that live on the page, and we'll be able to see you. I apologize. I have worked over this last week trying to figure out why this is happening and why this is going on. But, technology being what it is. All right. You can't type and talk at the same time. Yeah. Look, I really wanted to get into DNA today. You know, recently I went into the whole Darwin thing. I got some pushback, which I expected. You're always going to get pushback because people want to say, "Hey, man, what you said about Darwin, um, it I don't agree with." I guess if you've been taught the same thing for years, decades, people believe that and they hold on to that, and that's hey, that's your prerogative. However, everything that I said about Darwin was absolutely correct. And I wanted I really did. I really wanted to go in today and go further into it and then get into the DNA. One of our viewers, Pastor Razor, had made a comment a couple of weeks ago saying that we should cover DNA. And I wanted to get into Jim Ewell's as Darwin thought about it. I wanted to get into pangenesis and how he saw all of that. But the problem is, I think that though the discussion of that has to have visual. And it's not to say that the audience is not smart enough to catch on. It's so much part of the variations and things that he put into it, and to explain those theories, and then to give you the alternative of why those theories may be, not fully correct, and going into the people like John Baptiste Lamarck, who inspired Darwin and others. So in order to do that, I just think it's just a better time spent waiting until next week, and then I will get more into that, right? But we're here tonight. And because I've been so busy, and I really have this week, I've been busy. Some things that have been going on. I've tried, but I couldn't get too much into a lot of things. So I'm open to whatever you all want to discuss tonight. I got 2 people on here tonight. Hey, I'm sure there's probably more. Please, 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 I will say this again. Chat to us over YouTube. Or go to the Erudition Network main Facebook page. And we will see what you put in chat. Share. Get people to join and come on, and so that this discussions that we do on these Thursdays are beneficial. I will tell you that there are things going on with me right now that I'm going to pray that we can continue to do a live every week Thursday broadcast. As things change, and as time and my requirements and things that people need from me, it's not always that easy for me to do this. And I try to tell people all the time, I do this as a labor of love, because I truly believe we need to share our history. We need to share it. And so I want you to share this program, help us grow this network, help us grow this message, what we're putting out here, so that we can better serve our communities, not just the Black community. Because understand that in these schools and in the country right now, it is not just African American kids who are being denied history. It is children of all cultures and backgrounds and creeds who are being denied history. And they're being denied essential history for them to be able to better appreciate their peers and classmates and neighbors, to understand what their culture had to go through. You said you turned in because you said it was an interesting topic and may explain. So, what? Kansas City? What are you talking about here? What? You need to be a little bit more elaborate. I don't know, because you said you had an interesting topic and it may explain some Kansas City history. Okay. I'm really not catching on what you're saying right there. But I want us to just, to go for it. Teddy, I know you were in the background. I'd ask you to kind of look at some of these pages too, see if you see anybody who may be commenting on the page, but not necessarily in the broadcast, so that we could do a better job of answering them. But I will, over this broadcast, continually tell everyone to go to the Erudition main page, and we will be able to see your comments. Let's talk about something tonight. Spell check killing my comments. Okay. I believe she is referring to Bleeding Kansas. Oh, the conversation that we had the other day. So here's the thing. I guess I could sidetrack into that. Excuse me, I'll get the burps. A conversation came up in my house over the last couple of days because of some of the things that we see in the news. And there are a lot of things that are going on. We have this issue with the abortion issue that's going on. We have the issue with affirmative action. We have these issues with basically Congress and the courts passing things that are not agreed upon by the greater American public. I think that's the most judicial way I could say that. Things that people aren't necessarily agreeing with. And so when we were talking about it, I said it's almost like we're going back to Bleeding Kansas. And if you don't know what Bleeding Kansas is, we're talking about the massacres that occurred in 1856 and the territorial fights that went on before the Civil War, where there were three entities fighting for Kansas because of the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, right? And saying that basically all of these things that were being done, right, to allow the country to equalize slavery, right? So whereas Kansas could come in as a free state and I believe Nebraska could come in as a slave state, and these agreements, these compromises, and people still trying to further slavery. So you had an issue where you had free staters, right? And you had people who were pro-slavery. And then you had the peaceful abolitionists and not so peaceful abolitionists. And all of them were fighting. But in the end of the day, you had politicians and people who were dying in those states because the will of the people of the state, as some people saw it, was not being respected. The rules of law that had been passed and the compromises were not being respected. And so what ended up happening was murders, killings. Soldiers were killed, legislators were killed, innocent people were killed because people got tired of feeling like they weren't being heard. And we have to be careful in this world right now, because if you are not careful, we will find ourselves back. I can't even say that. I couldn't even get it out of my mouth. We are at that point. People are disenfranchised. They are murdering, killing, everything that we saw in Bleeding Kansas because of people being angry with the fact of being unheard after the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. By the time we got to 1856, right, where John Brown and his sons killed pro-slavery advocates and chopped them up with dull sword blades. Yes. By the time we had gotten to that point, it was it's out of control. But we're seeing this in society right now. Folks are killing and shooting. We were watching the other day, me and my wife, and they were saying that the death rate of doctors has gone up, is on the rise. It was like 67%. Doctors being killed. We're seeing mass shooters or people going into hospitals and shooting up hospitals. People are disenfranchised. They're disenfranchised. And history gives us a roadmap to show us how all of this happens, right? How we can get too far or too far out there and things get out of control. The Civil War did not happen in a vacuum where thousands of men died fighting against their own families, some of them. For what? Because you wanted to restrict the lives of others. What we're seeing in this country right now is really, really disheartening. Because we're coming to that point again. The weather it's almost like we're repeating. During the Dust Bowl era, we had lynchings and murders. People were disenfranchised. People felt like they were getting the short end of the stick. People were angry. During the Western expansion, folks were dying en masse from elements, and we're seeing that in the country right now. The heat, the floods, the extra rain. And when people feel like they're being attacked on all sides, historically, they do things. They act out. They feel like they have to control something, even if it is life and death. And I hate to make that the point, but that is the point. That's where we are. And so I am a little worried that we don't teach history in the way that we should, because in not doing so, right, we are allowing things to repeat. We are allowing things to continue. As I said, I didn't know particularly what topic we would talk about tonight. Oh, good to see you, Pastor Sarge. I'm glad that you're back. I'm sorry about the issues that we're having with StreamYard, but thank you for joining us. Tina, thank you. Yeah, again, thank you, Pastor Sarge. People may not know how to link the history to current events. Glad you're making the connection. Well, thank you, sweetie. I'm glad that you feel that way. That makes me feel very happy. Oh, my wife. Under tremendous pressure, can't figure out life. And those pressures, historically, they don't work well in this country, because one, a lot of times in our teaching and our training, we're being a little bit, I hate to say it, but it's the truth, disingenuous. We're being disingenuous. I responded to a friend's comment today. He had said, he had put out, I'll see if I can find it. One of the friends of the show, yes, Sean Pritchard, he had sent out a thing the other day saying, how long should we continue teaching and talking about slavery and or the struggle of our people? Does that help or hurt the future? What's the balance? And I guess he had posted this a couple of days, and I just said I've been busy and I happened upon it. And I wanted people to understand one of the reasons why we do Erudition, why I think it's so important to do this broadcast, even though like tonight, when I don't really have a topic for you that I can really get into visually. But I want you to know that this history is so important. In reference to his question, slavery has left a psychological, emotional, and historical impact on us. It has even affected us spiritually. The way we worship, the way we go to God. everything has been affected in the African American community. And we don't spend a lot of time in our history focusing on those facts. We don't focus on the fact that these things have touched us. They have touched us, and they have made a change in the way we look at the world. And until we understand that, until we get our minds around that, right? Slavery hardened and hurt people. It made them feel that their souls were either worthy or unworthy. They were taught from baby to the grave by people who subjugated them. And so if we do not address it, and people say, well, slavery was a long time ago, but the psychological, emotional, historical, religious impact of it is strong. Now, that doesn't mean that that should be the only thing we focus on is the hurt. That doesn't mean that that's just our fact and what our lot and what we have to accept. That is why education, like what we're doing tonight, is key. Is key. As I told him, if we can learn about Charlemagne, and I chose Charlemagne on purpose as a start of the Roman Catholic Church, as a start of the idea of putting religion to government. I chose Charlemagne on purpose, and the idea of being a king and a leader, even though Charlemagne waited until just about his death to call himself a Christian. But we're taught about Charlemagne. We're taught about the kings and queens of England, France, Germany, Spain, Portugal. But you're not aware of the Bandarians, the Tazians, or the Meridans. Many of us don't know anything about the African Phoenicians and how they traveled and how they impacted the ancient world. We have no idea of our cultural connections with them. And because of that, because as I told them of that cultural castration, because that's what it is, they've cut us off. We dwell only on the subjugation, on slavery, of being marginalized. And it's a painful fact. And it's something that we need to admonish. I get on here every Thursday, and I know that somebody told me recently, maybe I should take a break. Don't do it every week. Don't do the interactive per se every week. Now, don't do a program or put a lesson or something out, but don't do the interactive every week. Because it becomes so, oh, he's on this week. It's okay. And I had to weigh that for a while because I said, yeah, I get what you're saying, but I also know that our people are not being taught history. And that is getting worse. When you break down, as in the reply I gave to Sean earlier today, when you really break it down, it's scary what we're taught. If you pick up a history book, say this one here, right here today, and you open up the very first pages of a history book, right? The first thing you're confronted with is how people moved from the ancient world into the Americas, into what is known as civilized humanity. It's one of the first things that you're presented with. And then later on, you're taught about the savages and those people who, they were here, but they didn't bring anything significant to the world, right? you're seen as spear holders, hunter gatherers, and that's what you're seen as. And in the midst of all of that, we get caught up. One of the reasons why I've been spending so much time talking about Darwinism lately, we get caught up in the idea that we have no purpose. We have no reason to be here other than to help a more advanced society. And if you don't believe that, the very first lessons our children are taught in school, especially African American and people of color, they are taught to be under subjugation. They are mediocrity. You're something that not important. We're told that even if the first person was born in Africa, the birthplace of humanity, okay, but if that is the truth, as they tell you that it is, right, then they tell you, well, yeah, but you weren't men. You were hominids. You were monkey men. That's what came out of Africa. You, the first men who were monkeys, right? And over time, you became what we are by mutation. You became intelligent, Homo sapiens, Homo erectus, Homo sapiens, Homo sapiens sapiens. And then by the time they put emphasis on emerging cultures and civilizations, they talk about Mesopotamia. And they tell you that Mesopotamia was essential in human growth, and it absolutely was. It absolutely was. However, they emphasize that the Mesopotamians, right, that those people were Arab. Those people weren't black. This is what they tell you. This is what we're taught. This is what they see visually in their books. They tell you that the people of the Levant aren't African, even though the people of the Levant came out of Africa. But you're not taught that. You're taught that the Mesopotamians came up with writing and trade, and they did all of these amazing things. We even talk about them in the Bible, and you hear all of the things about the Sumerians and Mesopotamians and all of this stuff that was going on. But very few talk about the African Phoenicians. Very few talk about the tradesmen who were sailing all around the Med or through the coast of around the coast of Africa, north to the Britons. We don't talk about that. We don't talk about the people who were in the Iberian coast around Italy and Spain and how all of those people migrated also. We don't talk about those Black people. The emphasis is put on the other. And even by the time you give any credit to anybody in the African continent, you usually don't talk about the Nubians, the Bandarians, the Tazians. You don't talk about those people. You talk about the Egyptians. And we all see right now what is going on in Egypt. They tell you the Egyptians were not Black either, even though they're in Africa. So again, a negative assertion is to our children in these history books about who they are. It is so important to know our early world history. Because see, these early lessons that these schools use to shape our kids tell them that they're not important, that their cultures provided nothing important to discovery, to the growth of this world. And they teach us, right? They go out of their way to teach us our failures, but not our triumphs. And so every Thursday when I come on Erudition, I try to talk about that. I try to point out to you that it's not about 1619. It's not about slavery. Slavery without any early knowledge of who you are could make you feel horrible. It would make you feel like you are less than. But when we teach history in its fact and in its truth, then we learn, whoa, we did that? We were that? I had a man recently, a couple of days ago, he said he got on social media and said that, well, the Vikings were the first ones in the Americas. And he based that off of a story, which is actually a story that was told. And I was telling my son, I said, you know what's interesting about the Vikings? The Vikings did travel, right? And they did come over to the Americas. But you know what the Vikings did in Europe that they did not do in some of the southern areas that they went to? They raided, they killed, they murdered. Whereas in other places, they actually did what we call syncretism, where they became a part of the ecosystem and they didn't kill everybody. Why do you think that is? Because they saw the Saxons and the people of the North as violent. And they warred against them, against their church, against their hypocrisy. But you're not taught that either. But I will tell you, when you pick up this book again, and I'm going to pick up this book again, and you go look through here, and as I showed you all earlier, and you start looking at how people traveled. I always tell people, when you look at this, it's always funny because they show South America, they show North America, they show Beringa. They never show you life migrating from Africa. They never show you that, even though we know that to be the fact. Because see, if we just tell you one thing, if we tell you and give you the idea and we program you for the better part of 12 to 13 years in school, and we teach these things to you and you believe them, we got you. Sorry, I've been ignoring you guys' comments. I apologize. Let me get back to this. Our elders died before we fully comprehend the connections of history and current events. So it's vital that someone helps us to connect the two. You know, when I came up with that quiz about 2 years ago, and I talked about the Sasha and trying to get people to understand how we move something from the folks who are in our history right now. That's your grandparents. That's people who are still alive, who actually remember when Dr. King, when Malcolm X, when Medgar Evers, when all of these people actually walked the earth. And they can tell you stories, right, about Fred Shuttlesworth and different folks, and they can tell you what they did, who they were as men and women who lived and flesh and blood and cried and died. In comparison to someone like a Frederick Douglass or a Booker T. Washington, who nobody right now alive can speak to you about who those men were, how they actually felt, because they're gone. They're gone. And because we don't understand how important our history is to hold on to, because it is easy for things to go into the past without a connection. The connection stays alive by the people who are willing to pass down the information. If you are a person in the Church of God in Christ and you sat under the ministry of Bishop Mason and you passed that down, well, this is how he actually felt. I knew him, I talked to him, or any of those presiding bishops, right? You know what they thought. I knew him as a man. I met him. You can tell me about what you read in a book, but I know this person. It's the same way in our families. Great-great-grandmama, oh, she was a brilliant cook. She was a great seamstress. great-great-granddad, he was a master of tools. He was a mechanic. So that when the next generation has mechanics and beauticians or seamstresses or whatever, right? They have a connection there. They know that they can do better because they have had someone in their family who has demonstrated that mastery. But when they die without passing knowledge, we get into the problem that we have right now. We get into the problem that we have right now. And we can do so much better. Hey, what's up, Mike? Good to see you, brother. Focus on the half story that make people feel horrible. And that was used to disenfranchise people from learning. So it was okay to ban teaching. It's easy to ban something if you don't know nothing about it. Why do you think that Hitler decided to burn books? If I can stop you from thinking, from forward progress, right? I can keep you there, stuck, looking to me for the information that you need. It's so sad that things get lost with time. And we have to do a better job. It's so important, Pastor Sarton, for even in the church. You know, as I do a lot of research into family histories. And one of the major sources of family histories, especially as you get into the slave times, is the family tree that is written in Bibles. That is a source. That is how you know who Uncle such was, or who was married to who. Because even if the marriage wasn't respected by traditional law, it was kept. People wrote down the babies that they had and what they named them. But somewhere out of the nadir, after we got through slavery coming into Reconstruction, we had a whole generation that taught itself, let's just get away from it. It's too painful. And we didn't share. And unfortunately, what that has left us is 2 generations now of people who don't know who they are, wandering in the wilderness, slaughtering each other, and not realizing the very people that they're slaughtering are people who are related to them. And the sickness of that has affected all cultures. And how America sees that it's okay because our gun culture tells us it's okay. You know, I see what you're saying here. My dad tells me very often that the matriarch of his family, they would ask her and she won't tell because of the pain. And even if we can't get past or get back that information, we got to do better in the coming generations. But what happens is a conditioning. It's a mental conditioning that tells us that we can't even do that with each other. So many families that don't talk to each other. And we miss those connections. But this is actually the problem in history in itself. I will tell you as a historian that there are so many connections that are ignored. If you go and you look at the movement of people, as I was saying a few moments ago, and you look at the African Phoenicians who traveled by sea, you look at the Vikings, you look at the people, Japanese, right? and the people in Ecuador, who have similar styles of culture and how they fish and how they, the pottery that they made. You look at Siberia and Alaska, and you see the bone structures being the same. The Chinese and the Central Americans, right? And how their cultural studies and stories are the same. But we're not taught that. We're not taught that. The African Phoenician and the Viking, the Celtic, right? And looking at how they design their buildings and their scripting and everything, and how they're very similar. And we see that in areas of Britain and even in New England, in our country, in artifacts that have been found. But because the message hasn't been set down or passed down, it allows people to create the lie that there is no connection. There is no connection. When you look at the West African and you see that the Haitian and the people in Panama and the people in Brazil share similar stories, similar builds, and their cultures are similar. But they will tell you that life did not come across the ocean from Africa to South America. My point to you tonight is that because we don't pass these stories, because we don't teach our history, we lose it. I always tell people the story of how Columbus, and for years folks didn't know this. Many people still don't. When Columbus got here, he knew where he was going. He had been told about the Africans who had been there before, who helped the people design their spears. We, in archaeology and in history, we look at things that are similar and familiar. If the Polynesian from the Polynesian Islands and the people of Chile have similar fish hooks and they fish in similar ways, how did they learn that? If the arrowheads that are used by indigenous people in the Americas are the same arrowheads and things used from northern African tribes, how did that happen? I told my syncretism no longer exists in the world. Syncretism was the idea that African Phoenicians and explorers had before the time of the European. They went to a culture to trade, to grow, not to conquer. And between both cultures brought things together and they became synchronous with each other. They worked with each other without destroying each other. But upon the arrival of Columbus and others, it became imperialism. It became the idea of wealth, domination, mitigation. No longer were we sharing the wonders and the benefits of the cultures collectively. And I don't have to make that up to you. Columbus's own words from his own journal said that when he arrived in Hispaniola, what he said was, we can conquer these people very easily. And despite everything that those indigenous people did for Columbus, even helping him to get one of his ships out of the rocks, despite all of that, he went back over to Europe and came back with cannons, soldiers, and weapons to conquer those people. That is the difference. And because of all of that, a lot of things in our cultures have not been passed. A lot of things we don't know. A lot of connections we no longer have connection to. When the African American tells you, I can't track my family beyond the Civil War. But it's deeper than that. We can't even track the progression of Africans over into the New World because of pseudo archaeology and pseudo history that has told us we have no worth. That is now feeding into current times where Egyptians are now telling you we're not African. Where Africans darker than me are saying that we're Arab and not African. And the more we cloud the history, the more we lie about it. We lose that thing that W.B. Du Bois talked about, that I keep talking about almost every week now. That gift of Black folks. You are gifted, people. You have a gifted people. They were gifted in labor. They were gifted in the idea of government and democracy and fair treatment. They were gifted in their ability to use soldiers. At least we forget how the Zulus made it hard for the English, a dominant force, to beat them. Without the African, there would be no understanding of freedom, democracy, and liberty in America. Because they meant different things back then. Democracy to the founding fathers meant that me as a wealthy person, I have position under the king. Because I have wealth, the king gives me position. If you don't believe that, think about how Benjamin Franklin, how John Adams, and all went over to the court to ask for position, to put diplomats under the king, our special connection still with England. And when they felt that they weren't getting that special treatment, they rebelled. And the only way that they were able to defeat the British was because of the French. The French came and saved them. How were the French able to save them? You know why? Because the French people were a little bit more open to the idea of coming to help the Americas. Because they saw the wealth in it. How did they know about the wealth in it? Because they themselves had slaves in Haiti and in South America. And as we go further past the revolution, when the French had their revolution and Napoleon came to power, Napoleon couldn't beat the Haitian Revolution. So what did Napoleon do? He pulled forces out of the Americas. And he sold the Louisiana Purchase, all of this land in America, to Jefferson to fight his wars. And why was that? Because he could not beat the African in Haiti. You have a gifted people that made a significant purpose in this world. And yet we're not taught about it. Our kids are taught about so many things in their history books that have nothing to do with who they are as a people. And I'm going to tell you all, and I'm going to be really honest with you, it pains me when I sit down and I see people walking around with 1619 hats and 1619 medallions. That ain't my history. I'm more than that. I'm not an indentured slave. I don't come from people who were just slaves. My people navigated around the coast of Africa. My people helped to build the temple of God. Solomon, who went over to the king of Tyre and the Phoenician king and asked him to allow his people, that's per the Bible, to sail around the coast of Africa to get the necessary treasures to build God's temple. Man, you are gifted people. Don't ever let them tell you that you are just a slave and then tell you to get over the slavery. Our literature. I was telling my son the other day about Phyllis Wheatley, who wrote all about the revolution, a black slave. Go read the poems of Langston Hughes, Gwendolyn Brooks, Maya Angelou. Go read the older books of the Three Musketeers by Alexander Dumas. Go read these books and understand how gifted our people are. Go read the works of W.B. Du Bois, Carter G. Woodson, John Henry Clark. Go read these works. Whether you agree with them or not, understand that there are people who gave their lives under attack. Go read Ida B. Wells and read about how courageous she was in women's suffrage and in civil rights. Going and interviewing people who killed and murdered and burned black bodies. And then you wonder about the courage. But we don't teach our kids this. I told my father one time, I said, people don't even know who Ida B. Wells is. They don't know who she is other than the name on a school or a name of a project. They don't know because we don't teach. And now it's coming harder because people are telling us we can't teach. America would not be America without black people. And that's not being boisterous. That's not me telling you a lie or a convenient fact. That's the truth. There would be no Louisiana Purchase without the Haitian Rebellion. There would be no revolution success without the black African black men who fought to be free, who fought in a Revolutionary War. One of the first bodies to drop in rejection of the British was Crispus Attucks, a biracial black man who, when they shot him dead, the soldiers said they saw a large black Negro running at them with something, and it scared them enough to shoot him to death and shot him again when he was down. Does that sound familiar to where we are today in society? I didn't know what I was going to teach tonight. I thought I was going to go into DNA, give you a very scientific lesson. But God knows. God knows where we are. God knows what we need. I am hoping that we can continue the interactive, but I have changes coming that may prevent me from doing lives like I would like to, at least on Thursdays, every Thursday. But I'm asking you right now to share, to grow. Let's get out here. Let's discuss these things. Share this with young people. The one thing that I always say is, if anything, if or share what you learned. If you don't want to share the broadcast, please do me the favor and share what you learned. Share whatever book, whatever person that we talked about, share that knowledge. And see if it doesn't change them. See if it doesn't help them. In this world where we're seeing people under attack from all areas of life, it's important to go read The Sojourner of Truth. It's important to go read about Ida B. Wells. It's important to know that these women here who were here, Black women, we talk about abortion. We talk about all of this stuff. We talk about all of these things that are going on in the country. In a country that basically told a Black woman that she could not possess the child that came out of her womb. A country that would kill the baby that came out of her womb. And then we say, well, Roe versus Wade. It's longer and deeper than that. When Sojourner Truth made her speech, "Ain't I a woman too?" It's important to read on these things. We have to be better. We have to grow. And we have to stop letting people tell us the lie that it ain't important. A country that will tell you that all lives matter should never get so upset when you say Black Lives Matter. Because then it makes you understand, what do they mean by all? Because it must not include you. A country that can make legal distinctions of people based on the complexion of a skin. Legal, constitutional changes based on the color of a person's skin, the complexion. That can change for white folks if they walked out there and got burned by the sun. It's ludicrous. It's foolish. It's reductive, but we're doing it again. We're doing it again. Where you have to go and get legislation passed in order to how you wear your hair to work. Our history is important, and at the forefront of that history is the migration of Black people out of Africa into the modern world, and tracing the bones back to understand how we significantly contributed to this world. I guarantee you, if you went and asked 5 Black people tonight to name you at least 4 things in the last 4 centuries, not in the last 10 years, 4 centuries that Black people have done to push humanity further, they probably couldn't name anybody out of the last, other than what we've been taught from the last century. They couldn't name them. Names have been lost. And it's unfortunate, because we could do better. But a lot of us are also falling under the sway that it's not important. That it's not important. I love all of those people too, right? I love looking at what we've accomplished over the last century. I love looking at all of these Black people who helped us to accomplish these things. But I also try to look beyond that. We need to. All right. I think I'm coming up on my hour. Yeah, I am at my hour. Ladies and gentlemen, let me make sure I got some of these last comments here. Teach brother, so glad to have caught you live. Oh, I appreciate you. Thank you for joining us. Oh, I really do appreciate you. Great point, Pastor Simon, but we must move past the pain to prevent perpetual suffering. Yes, that pain, we got to get past that pain. Sometimes people are so comfortable with the familiarity of the cycle of suffering, the fear of possible joy, doing the unknown is unsettling and avoided. People don't know how to accept. This needs to be talked about in order to assure our history never dies. We have to do better. Yes. Right. Thank you all. Hey, I hope you all didn't feel like I was preaching at you tonight. I didn't know what we were going to talk about. I had other plans, but I think we had a pretty good session tonight. Please join the Erudition Network. Share the broadcast. Share it with the people that you know and people that you love. We are trying to grow this network. And I'm asking God to really, really help us to grow, because we really need to teach. There's so many things out here that need to be covered. Next week, I am going to get into the DNA because we need to talk about that. The actual science, history, and understanding of it, and as we get further into Darwin and things like that. But until then, I thank you for your time. A lot of things coming down the pike for Erudition, so please be on the lookout for that. Tina will be back on Monday. The boys will be back on next Wednesday. I may, depending on if anybody sends me a request, we may do a wrap up on Saturday, which is what we do to give opportunity for a conversation for people who couldn't join us live today. But until then, today I see we did remember to keep the ticker up. If you want to help the Erudition Network with anything, even if it's $10, $5, whatever it may be, anything is appreciated to the Erudition Network. It helps us to buy these cameras that we're using and the lights and the mic that we have here. It allows us to do things with programs that we need as we build courses and things that are coming to you. So whatever you can do to help us, we greatly appreciate. It definitely helps us. But if you do nothing else, please share the broadcast with those you love, and even those who you may not love, right? So that we may all grow together. All right, I'm gonna get out of here and stop running my mouth. Been running my mouth for over an hour, so it gets tiresome. But until next time, you all be blessed, and I thank you again for spending this hour with me. God bless you.